All right, Pandemic Legion winning a really entertaining slugfest that looked like it could go both ways. That Logi trade in the beginning, super important.
It looked a little bit closer perhaps than it actually was. I mean, that is an absolute brawler setup designed to trade Logis. As we saw, they didn't even try to protect their Logi. Their Logi just tried to build some range and then just sit there and let himself be killed. But by that time,
as slow as possible.
Die as slow as possible. And by that time, they had traded a Logi and a Merlin and were in good position to take on other targets as well. But definitely a brawler setup. I mean, otherwise, Ishtar's Vexors wouldn't go in that close.
So, but that's what I'm curious about. They obviously were trading efficiently. We were saying stuff in between, like the Sentry drone DPS allows them to switch targets more quickly than the Proteases, which have to burn from thing to thing as they switch. But in this particular situation, if you're PL and you bring, even if it is a brawler setup, they have tackle on the Ishtars or the Vexors, why, when you see Proteuses, do you go in against them? I mean, couldn't you still kite?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you have the option to try and use sentries to mitigate, or even just make the time it takes them to go from target to target much longer? It seemed like they just piled in.
Absolutely, that's a very good point, and I can't, without remembering or disclosing the fits exactly, I can't tell why they went in. But I mean, obviously the amount of webs that we saw on the stream there made it kind of obvious that I think quite a few of those ships that went in there to tackle. Maybe they tackled multiple Proteuses off their targets and tried to kind of spread the damage that way, force them to shoot more targets at once, which with their EHP difference would give them the advantage. I know perhaps we can load up the fight here on the pad in a little while once the crest feed finishes. Of course, we have to wait a couple of minutes after the match before we can do it, but we can have a look at it.
Maybe also just mention, we think it's likely that Seamus was disconnected for that match. They were talking about how his speed was at 0.
Yeah.
His speed picked up once, but it was probably from being bumped, and he probably just wasn't connected for the majority of that match.
No, absolutely. I mean, that actually happened yesterday during one of the matches. One of our pilots disconnected during the, I can't remember what the match was, during Agony Empire match. It didn't affect the situation then, but of course this kind of disconnects of team captains in particular are always a little bit tinfoil hat-ish in that nowadays finding out an IP of anybody who uses Skype is quite easy, and perhaps somebody just decided to press a button and make him disappear off the internet.
That's a little bit scary. How do you guard yourself like that?
You don't use Skype.
Always good advice in any situation.
All right, fair enough. All right, so that was super exciting. Regarding our schedule today, we do have some matches that can end up slightly odd. We have best of 3s, we have a best of 5. We're going to try and go through the schedule as quick as possible to kind of try to readjust according to what happened. So we started that match a little bit early. We might start the next one a little bit early as well, just so we can get the teams back and ready for whatever stage they're in next. Exodus and Hydra Reloaded are our next match. Like I said before, Hydra had the same bans for all 3 matches yesterday, and they're actually doing the same thing now. So Hydra have banned out the Dominics and the carries again. Exodus have kind of done the same. They've banned out the Maulus instead. Or sorry, they've banned out the Maulus, and instead of banning out the Gila, they've banned out the Ishtar. Does that make sense?
That doesn't make a lot of sense.
They're similar ships in a lot of ways, except the Ishtar tends to lend itself to an armor setup. It seems weird to not ban out the Malice in this case, considering that ship was such a problem for them last time.
Maybe they're just happy to kill more of them.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're speculating that if Hydra are losing them, they might not want to bring them now.
I don't think that's going to be the case. I think perhaps they're banning the Ishtar because now they wish Hydra to go with the Gambian Etana shield team. That by letting them use the Gila, that kind of pushes them towards that setup once again. Now, last time they did this and they should have guessed what they're bringing. Will they guess this time, and will Hydra see the obvious kind of a push this time around? I don't know.
So yesterday, Hydra brought expensive tournament ships to the first match in the series with PL, and then after they won that match, they backed off their expensive setup. So do you think in this situation, because they have a match over Exodus, they can back off expensive setups again and not bring in Etana or Malices?
I think it's very possible,
and
considering that like,
try to
they
win
can
a
afford
match
to
without
lose this one.
risking.
I think they will, especially because they just lost one.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of reason to do it now when you can do it match 3 if it comes to that.
And not only did they lose one, but they saw a setup from Exodus that I'm sure they feel confident they can compete with without using tournament chips. Like they don't have a big reason to bring big guns right now, it seems like. But
No, you're right. I think bringing out Hawks instead of Gambians will be
Yeah.
just as effective bringing out a logistics cruiser.
yeah, they could run the
Basilisk.
Daytona setup with Basilisk and
Basilisk,
Hawks
yeah.
and probably be fine.
Yeah, I
Or at
mean,
least it's worth trying and then going to the Daytona in
I
the
think
third
it
match.
It would beat this setup that Exodus brought out the first match. Exodus can probably beat that setup. Like if you go the Cambion team without the Cambion Rotana, Exodus I think is capable of beating that. But again, second match, you're already up by 1. You can risk it.
I think they'd be capable of beating it if they had the time to prepare for it. But I worry that Exodus may not have the logistics abilities to quickly adapt in the time between the bans and the field. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I'm especially curious about Exodus because they had the Dominix banned out. They tried to make some adjustments to make up for it. Didn't work. Dominix is banned again. What do? Do you bring the same thing? Anyway, we do have some fancy in-game UI that you guys can look at during the match that kind of explains a little bit better what's going on in our kind of 3D environment there. We're going to bring up some graphics now, and we'll have you guys walk through what's going on here.
Do it, Fozzie.
Yeah, so this is a UI that we introduced for the New Eden Open, and then we've also used it here in this Alliance tournament. So in the center there, you've got the time left on the match, and then beside each member of each team, you'll see all the effects that are applied to the team. So that'll be scram, webs, neutralizers, E-War. If you see an ECM icon, that just means someone is attempting to jam them. It doesn't necessarily mean that the jam has been successful because it is chance-based. We then have the attack, defense, and control bars, which are there to help let people know what type of team people are bringing, what the strengths and weaknesses of that team is. The defense bar is split between the one part that gives you all of the effective hit points of the team, the passive defense, and then the end gives you their rep. And then the attack is the amount of damage. The whole bar is the amount of damage they could do theoretically, and the amount that that bar is filled is how much of that damage they've been applying recently. And then control is similar. The whole bar is how much potential electronic warfare and control they have, and then it's filled based on how much of that is actually being used at that time.
And maybe worth saying that the control bar is kind of a consolidation of all kinds of control effects, including neutralizers and some things that aren't necessarily classified as E-War. So,
you'll see teams that have long-range newts, like a Balgorn team, do really well on that because we actually weigh those pretty heavily in the points for that. Long-range webs also really good, or strong webs. So there's all this kind of different things that allow you to basically dictate what the enemy does. Everything like that goes into the control bar.
It absolutely does. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of follow what's going on. It could be a bit confusing in space if you're not really that into the game and know the effects and all that stuff.
It's great both for people that are fairly new to the Alliance tournament because it gives you a way to compare different teams without having to know what each chip does. It also is really handy for people that are very experienced in watching the tournament because you can glean some really cool bits of information from it. Like when someone overloads their guns, when a whole team overloads their guns, it actually makes the attack bar get bigger. If someone has an ASB on reload, you'll see their defense bar drop. So there's all these kind of little bits and things that you can pick out if you know what to look for.
Yep. Against an ECM team, it'll show quite easily when they are able to apply their EW and when they're perhaps dampened. And what's going on the control bar is going to show you all of that as well, which is really cool.
And you know what? No matter what people tell you, the size of the bar does matter. It's important for winning the matches. So as tournament contestants, or previous tournament contestants, do you have, so of course we're running the stream on a delay from the actual match. Do you have people watching the stream trying to pick things up and feed you information live, even though it's delayed?
No.
No?
No.
All right.
Really?
No.
I thought you said they did, like yesterday.
No, not stream. We do this year have a tool that we monitor the
yes,
press feed
now.
with, but we don't monitor the actual tournament stream. I mean, we have obviously 500-600 people are watching it, wondering how it's going on, but nobody in the tourney team specifically is watching it.
But what about alliances that maybe not have access to a specific tool? They will have it, correct?
We know for sure that a lot of teams keep an eye on the stream, maybe have another person who's not in the match watching the stream, checking for important pieces of information. It's easy when you're in the match to miss stuff because it's chaotic and there's a lot to pay attention to, but also sometimes we offer advice or notice things that are maybe not even very easy to see at all from the point of view of the people in the match. So
And I
it's
mean,
worth watching.
There's stuff you can see from the bars, from the applied effects, and well, I mean, of course, it's on a delay, but
There's
on a
stuff
delay.
like yesterday, Fozzie noticing that a team member who's providing remote ECCM for his logistics was actually shooting his logistics.
yes.
And of course, the only person who can notice that is probably the guy flying the ship
Yes.
shooting him. And of course, he hasn't noticed. And so, sometimes
Yeah.
pick up some little bits like that. But the really good teams shouldn't need that kind of
And
thing.
the secret of the really, really good teams is that if CCP Dolan tells you to do something on the stream, don't do it.
Do the opposite.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I'm fairly sure Hydra doesn't watch the match either, based on some of the comments they made yesterday. They don't. They're completely zoned into the match that's coming, and really having been part of those teams as well, Fuzzy as well can probably testify that
You're way
when
too
you're
busy.
in there, the 30 minutes before it, it's like you're in a black room and nothing else like matters. And I've been told that I've had some babies crying on the background, and I should go attend it. And things like that. But,
Well, I'm glad you're no longer a contestant then.
and the baby is no longer a baby either.
All right, so we do have Exodus Hydra Reloaded coming up here within the next minute or two. Then Ronin, Pandemic Legion. I think that Hydra might just 2-0 this one.
I think there's a very good chance of it.
One thing I was wondering, we were talking about, she was talking a lot about logistics. We know that last night almost nobody was practicing. And after yesterday, a lot of teams are probably getting towards burned out. And I wonder if Exodus is just super strained.
Very possible. Yeah, I mean, like our public API lets you know how many people are active on Duality. So I know some people have been keeping an eye on that, and you can see like Kriba's website, Eve Offline, shows it, and there I think we peaked at 19 people last night. So there weren't a lot of
Really?
people active there.
I would have expected some of the 4 teams here to have to go in and do some extra
You would
hours.
think, yeah.
You would
but-
think, but after 6 hours of spaceships
Yeah.
plus 2 hours on either side of it, Pandemic Legion, I jumped on in there and said, "Hey guys, are we testing?" I said, "No, everyone's gone to bed. They're wrecked. They're out of here." And
today's gonna
I
be even
believe
more
Hydra is
grueling
the same.
for everyone
Right.
involved, except for whoever wins the Hydra Exodus match. They get a bit of a relaxing middle of the day. But for everyone else,
Right,
you have to
Exodus-
fight like 12 matches in a row,
Yeah.
continuous 9 hours, and that's a lot of stress.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just, unfortunately, while I would root for Exodus, especially against Hydra, I don't see them being able to take this pressure and load. And this is actually one of the reasons why I believe Hydra is going forward in the winners bracket is going to be a massive, massive advantage to them in the
Yes.
final, that they have had that break between and watch and chill and kind of
And they
sit back, do a
Get
bit
to
of
see
logistics.
what the teams they're
Yeah.
going to fight are doing and see what kind of things they're tending towards and
Yeah.
strategize for that instead of
Yep.
hustling around getting setups for matches all day like the teams in those brackets will have to do.
And you know what? They can just practice tonight. If all goes practice for next year. Start early. So some of the balancing changes we've done, what have they kind of impacted the meta this year compared to last year? Because we are seeing, I think, a lot more like class diversity. Like we're seeing a wider range within the classes. So what are some of the important things? I mean, maybe especially for the battleships, which we're seeing.
Yeah.
Battleships
Who
are very big.
boosted the sensor dampeners? Fess up. Come on, guys.
Oops. So that's another one is the center dance. But first, let's go over a bit of the battleships because those changed most recently.
Sure. So yeah, that has had a big effect. The biggest things probably are the Dominics and Armageddon for this tournament, but we've seen everything from Typhoons to Hyperions to the Navy battleships as well. The Dominics and Armageddon in a way changed the most. The tracking and optimal bonus for drones on the Dominics is really big, and the Armageddon picked up drone damage bonus as well as a neutralizer range bonus. Wow. And that had a big effect. The other big thing that's been important is the cruise missile change. We gave cruise missiles about 35% more damage than they used to have, and that's shown up here and there as well. Although not a ton in these late
Not in the
stages.
tournament, perhaps,
Well,
because
we've
of
seen some
sensor
booms.
dampeners.
Yeah, so the cheaper ships using sensor adapters have gotten a bit of a boost in Retribution, our expansion before last. The Celestis and the Maulus especially, they got bigger bonuses along with all the other cheap Tech 1 E-War ships that are great, accessible ships to new players. They're very powerful in this kind of environment too. And we also actually saw a lot of changes to the Tech 1 cruisers we made in that expansion being used here. Like we just saw a bunch of Xers. That's a ship that had a big, big upgrade in Retribution.
I think that little tag was the backrooms way of saying thank you for
that's
earlier,
right.
where
I
you said
forgot
they
I
weren't
said
really
something
that
about
important.
that. Okay, all right. Fair enough.
You just thought that was coming out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was like, geez, they don't like the balance changes or something? I don't know. I know, making enemies everywhere. RVB's mad too.
Speaking of balance changes, so we do have some changes coming up here in August that
A lot.
might impact next year's Alliance tournament.
Oh, they
Very
will.
likely.
Oh,
So
they
what do we
definitely
have
will.
coming up?
Well, I'm doing full hack rebalance.
The Russians are happy.
Someone in the Russian stream.
So a hack rebalance along with a medium weapon rebalance. Stop yelling. And then you're doing command ships.
Yep,
and
command
links.
ships and links, which is going to have a very big effect. It's actually going to be a gigantic nerf to these Tinker teams that I know some people haven't been huge fans of this year. They're very tactical, but maybe not as exciting. And we're going to be reducing the power of the defensive gang links that give you resist and give you more repping speed and less repping cap. Those are all going down a lot in power, so Tinker tanks are going to be getting a lot less powerful.
And the hacks are getting a lot better. The command ships themselves are going to be more combat focused as well. So
Yeah, like the EOS that you saw, just match it go there, that'll actually be able to throw a lot more drone damage around instead of just giving the links. So it'll be a much more fun ship to fly.
All right, those are some great changes, and I'm sure that actually once we get to next year's Alliance tournament, we'll have even more changes than just the ones coming up in August patch. Of course, we just got a little bit of information on what's on the field
Etana.
and 3 champions.
There you go.
there you go.
Calling them now. Let's see if
So,
Exodus can
If
pick up
Exodus
on
is
that.
very smart, they may have been trying to get this set up.
All
And
right.
if they're trying to get it, they may have something they feel they can counter it.
Yeah.
I know
Right.
what I would be bringing if I was them.
What would you be bringing?
If I was them, I would be bringing ECM. Some Kaldari jammers, try to push them into that, and then try to knock down the Etana.
Also known as a Hail Mary.
Who do you think's going to win, Rise?
I think Hydra's going to crush them.
I think Hydra's going to win, but I'm going to go with Exodus. I want to see a third match.
All right.
Unfortunately, I just don't believe that Exodus is able to see what's coming clearly and adapt to it. So we're gonna have to give it to Hydra, and they're gonna win some ships. Good game for them.
Seems crazy to go against Hydra with that much money on the field, so I think I might go with Hydra as well.